That I find very interesting is back in the 1970s when synthesizers were, well, they were like guitars. They could be used in any genre of music and were being used in any genre of music. People found their own uses for synthesizers. They found their own sounds that suited their intentions, and they just used them, and they were all over the place. Of course, people certainly focused on the, quote, futuristic aspect of synthesizers and would often apply what they viewed as sounds that sounded like the future or sounded technological or sounded like science fiction. Absolutely, those things took place, and eventually that became the focus. But back in the 1970s, the synthesizer was just another musical instrument. Unfortunately, it often focused on being a musical instrument like we have here, where it's really about a keyboard and playing new timbres to traditional music. So a lot of the music was, of course, traditional music. But the cool thing about it was there were a lot of functions that were used that are not used now because they do not suit application to the very specific genres that people use synthesizers for now. Synthesizers either sort of fell back to sort of romplers where you had a synth sound, but it wasn't about the synth. It was just the right sound for a song, and not like exploration. So like the musical synthesizers just became sort of canned presets. And of course now we have like various electronic music genres where there are expectations of what synthesizers are supposed to do and are supposed to sound like. And one of the things that I think was lost was a sort of experimentation. In the 70s, when synthesizers were still largely monophonic, or they were often monophonic when a band or musician couldn't afford the polyphonic one, so it continued for a while, there were ways to sort of get away from there's only one note happening at this point. And of course, tuning oscillators is one of those ways. And it's very useful. It's not often done these days because if someone wants a polyphonic synthesizer, they just go for a polyphonic synthesizer and don't waste any time trying to create what amounts to a sort of fake polyphony with the tuning of oscillators. But in that, we lose something that we used to have. Certain sounds that happened in the 70s that are not happening now. This is one of those. And there are two purposes of this sound, which I will explain after playing it for you. Here we go. As you might notice, the two oscillators, not only are our two oscillators set to different waveforms, they are being filtered differently with two different types of filters, the main one being a low-pass filter, the secondary one being a band-pass filter. And you might have noticed that they are tuned to two different pitches, which is cool. But the other thing that makes it really cool is that we have a slow envelope generator associated with the amp of the second oscillator. So it comes in later. It fades in. And when it does fade in, it's a major third above the note played by the first oscillator. The interesting thing, and I think this is why people don't usually do this, they don't have to, but when you have oscillators tuned to two different frequencies, you are kind of stuck with those two different frequencies. So like if your song has a minor chord and you go to the root of that minor chord and play it with this, you're going to hear a major third, which is going to interfere with your sound. So you often have to do tricks, like if you're going to play during the minor chord, you have to choose a note where the notes, the major third that you're playing fits into the top part of a minor chord or some other place where it won't interfere, so you don't have a major chord playing over a minor chord. So you have to be creative, but that's something people used to be willing to do. And the results were beautiful, and they sound very much like, what I'm doing here. You can also get that third to close a little bit faster. And we need it to close faster because if we play another note while that amp is still open, we're not going to get the full swell. It's not going to necessarily start back at 0, so it fades in like we currently have it, where first you hear the first oscillator and then the second oscillator fades in. If we play before the second oscillator's envelope is over, the second oscillator will immediately play. So we have to wait for it to go through its whole arc before we can play the next note. And that's certainly a thing that you can adjust by adjusting your envelope, but having that long spread is beneficial, and it depends on the tempo of your song, really. But I just wanted to portray this thing where it's possible to play two different notes. Now, on a typical synthesizer, not like this one, from this time, you wouldn't be able to have the second note come in at a different time because the two oscillators would be sharing a single VCA. But having another VCA with another envelope allows us to have one sound happen and then a second sound come in. And that is incredibly beneficial. And I'm going to demonstrate another way that's beneficial with attack transients in the next video. But yes.